For the last 80 years, we lived in a world where the line went up. Trade made everyone richer, war was something that happened only in history books, and the rule based international order was the only game in town. But now the engine is starting to fail, and the people in charge, the globalists, the nationalists, even the tech bros, are all screaming at each other, trying to figure out which button to push to turn the machine back on. But here is a dirty little secret: they're all pressing the wrong buttons, and the buttons are not even connected to anything in the first place. Today, let's explore the mechanics of how all this works. Let's see why exactly the golden age happened, why it's over, and why the next 20 years are going to look a lot more like a multipolar world run by dictators. So, to understand the economics, we need to be first able to define a fundamental rule that the entire humanity follows. All humans have the basic desire of survival. And for survival, they need certain resources at the right time. For example, if you need food when you are hungry to be able to satisfy hunger so that you will continue to survive. If you stay hungry for 2 or 3 days, you probably might end up dying. So to make sure that everybody has enough resources to survive in the given time is the whole point of studying economics. Now, to make sure that everybody is getting the right resources at the right time, us humans came up with two main ways of extracting resources from the earth. The first method was absolute production. Now, what do I mean by absolute production? Imagine a village where everybody is farming and they grow crops. And at the end of the day, all the produce is compiled into one single pile and everybody is given the output equally. The output is shared amongst everybody equally. Your grandma is bedridden, hasn't put any work, but still she gets food. Your friend who broke his leg hasn't put any work in the recent past, but still he gets food. The person who put the most effort into growing crops does not get more food, but just gets how much ever is required to survive. This seems like an ideal situation. Or is it? But before we go into its demerits, let's go to the other method of extraction. The other method of extraction is a relative competition. A relative competition is nothing but giving the total output based on how much effort the participating individual has put. So going back to the village, instead of just dividing the total output into equal parts and giving it to everybody, you make sure that everybody gets how much ever they've put in. So if one person spent a lot of time and effort growing a lot of crops, he gets to keep all those crops. It's all his property. This is relative competition. The problem is that both of these systems of extraction, if used alone, will cause massive problems. If you choose only pure absolute production, for example, a global commune where everybody is guaranteed a living wage regardless of effort, you hit the free rider collapse. See, the biology is fragile. Energy is expensive. Your brain is wired to conserve it. If you realize that you can get the same ration of food, whether you hunt for 10 hours or sleep for 10 hours, your biological incentive obviously is to sleep. Eventually, like you, the free riders will multiply. Most of them will start realizing that whatever effort they put, they'll probably end up getting the same amount of result. So the producers feel like losers and they stop working. The total pie shrinks until it's too small to feed the population, and the entire system starves through laziness. Now, what about the other extreme, pure relative competition? We hit the winner takes all collapse. Perfect meritocracy looks great until you realize that biology is not fair. Some people get sick, they get old, and they have bad luck. In a system, if you slip into the bottom 10%, you just don't go broke, you die. This wipes out your labor force. It wipes out your genetic diversity. You end up with a tiny, inbred elite of winners sitting on a pile of gold with nobody left to bake the bread. The system collapses through cruelty. So now we have a paradox. We need competition to motivate us to work, but we also need cooperation to keep us alive. How did humans solve this? We didn't solve this with economics. We solved it with cognitive science. We invented the fractal solution. Externally, we acted like the competitive tribe. Our group fights other groups. The fear of being conquered by other groups forces us to work hard. Internally, we act like the cooperative village. We tax the winners to feed the losers. But wait, why would a winner agree to this? Why would a young soldier die for an old stranger? Why would a billionaire pay the taxes for a plumber? See, biologically, it makes no sense. Everybody is hardwired to look only of their own needs, and sacrificing for anybody other than your own children or your own relatives who carry your own DNA makes no sense. You don't normally sacrifice for strangers unless you can trick the brain into thinking that the stranger is your child. This is the superpower of Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens developed the unique cognitive capacity to create this thing called a virtual kinship. We Homo sapiens invent abstract truths such as religion, the nation state, ideology, and all of these are just myths. They aren't physically real. You can't really touch France, you can't really hold the constitution. But by believing in them together, we create a sphere of kinship. We say, because we both salute this flag, we are brothers. This belief hacks our biology. It expands the circle of sacrifice from 5 people, like a family, to 500 people, the entire country. It allows us to scale our cooperative loop to the size of a continent while keeping the competitive loop directed outwards at the borders. And now this brings us to the three great ideologies of our time: globalism, libertarianism, and conservatism. These three aren't just different policies, they are arguments about how big the sphere of kinship should be. First, we have globalism. The globalist tries to expand the sphere of kinship to all 8 billion humans all around the world. But here's the flaw. Why would I have to spend my money and effort to produce some results that will be used to feed the bellies of some kid in Africa? This is what the globalists say, right? Use all of your money, donate so that African children can survive. I can understand it's a very good cause, but my virtual kinship, my feeling of family does not extend to somebody who is far away in Africa when I can see my own family suffering, right? So this does not make sense. On the other hand, you have libertarianism. What the libertarian does is that it reduces the sphere of kinship into the individual, but that is also flawed. This destroys the internal zone of safety without which a person will not be able to survive if he is not able to compete. So what happens? This creates a massive competition and everybody is participating in it. So the wife competes with the husband competes with the parents compete with the children compete with the grandparents, and you know what happens. Nobody is benefiting from this. At some point, the losers keep dying out, and you end up with only a small pack of winners who are sitting in a pile of gold. And this fragile elite also eventually collapses. Third, we have conservatism or nationalism. The conservative or the nationalist tries to make the sphere just the right size by applying boundaries, usually around this thing called the nation state. See, it seems perfect. It's large enough to pool resources for defense, and at the same time, it is small enough to maintain this myth of shared identity, of nationality. We are all Indians, we are all Americans. So, India can compete with America, and America can compete with Japan. But within India, we're all Indians, so we need to help each other out. Seems like the perfect solution, right? No, wrong. It too is unstable. It relies on the nation winning. Now, what do I mean by the fact that conservatism also is flawed and its seeming stability is dependent upon the capacity of the nation to keep winning in the relative competition against other nations? We can understand this by looking at the past 80 years of the world. After World War II, the United States pulled off a magic trick. It had such a massive lead in relative competition because everyone else was bombed to rubble that it could afford to expand its sphere of kinship to cover half the planet. This was the liberal international order. This was nothing but the UNO, World Health Organization, and get rich doing it. But then the math broke. The rest of the world caught up. For the past 80 years, the surplus of the Western world was built upon the sacrifices and exploitation of losers of the relative competition, like Russia, China, India, and Africa, the so called Global South. But now, since the Global South seems to be more and more powerful, and the Global South seems to have formed alliances like the BRICS, we are seeing the collapse of the myth that worked within the Western world. The virtual kinship among the West is dissolving, and the American worker looks at a foreign ally now and says, "You are not my kin, you are a competitor, you are taking my job." To the MAGA elite in America, which is supporting Donald Trump. Even Europe is not an ally anymore. Greenland is something to be conquered. Venezuela, Colombia, countries like this, South America, all of them can be conquered at any time for America's benefit. With this, the collapse of the Western world has started. The sphere of sacrifice is rapidly contracting, and we are reverting to more multipolar, harder circles. We are exiting the era of global cooperation and re entering the era of national competition. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that the stability of conservatism only depends upon the country winning. The moment it starts losing in the relative competition, it resorts to violence or either internal wall will break the country down. So what happens next? A new Cold War, a scramble for Africa? Probably. But even if the nationalists win and they stabilize the borders and we create a multipolar world led by dictators with a strong sense of national pride, we are all missing the biggest variable of all, the Malthusian ceiling. Now, what is the Malthusian ceiling? The Malthusian ceiling is nothing but a point where the global population grows to such a point where the total production is not able to meet the necessity of all. Both the capitalist growth model and the globalist cooperative model solve the problems by burning more energy. But the earth is a closed box. We are running out of cheap oil, we are running out of topsoil, and we are running out of water. If we stay in the zero sum mindset on a finite planet, the math only ends in one way: global starvation. The fractal solution breaks, you can't even invade other countries if there's nothing left to extract. So the math has hit the wall. The elites know it, and right now there is a silent civil war happening amongst the most powerful people on earth about which exit door to take. On one side, you have the new world order of subtraction. You see this manifesting as extreme climate activism, the push for degrowth, and the celebration of falling fertility rates. They are re-engineering society to accept less energy, less freedom, and fewer children. To them, you are the carbon that they're trying to reduce. On the other side, you have the accelerationists, led by figures like Elon Musk. Their logic is pure expansion. Musk is screaming for more babies, more energy, and more risk. So it feels like battle between saving the earth and conquering the stars. But either way, this looks very strange coming from a dharmic perspective. I mean, think about it. We started this entire discussion by assuming one simple fact that this entire earth is filled with resources for human consumption, and humans require resources for survival. And if resource consumption is stopped, or humans are not able to consume resources, they will end up in starvation or death. I mean, this seems true now. But if you look at the dharmic perspective and understand that the body is just a carrier and the body is no different from nature, we are not here for consumption. We are here for finding liberation. Then things start to change. Globalism, conservatism, libertarianism, all of these don't make sense. So to understand more deeply about how dharmic economics works, and maybe dharmic economics might have a solution for all of this, we need to watch the next video on how dharmic economics works.